Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine the scent of volcanic ash in the air, the flicker of oil lamps against stone walls, the distant cry of a street vendor in ancient Athens, or the creak of a Norse longship cutting through the northern sea. We're about to travel, not just across miles, but across millennia. Tonight, we step into the hidden corners of history. Not the grand halls of emperors or the speeches of philosophers, but the places where real life happened, where people laughed, loved, struggled, and survived. We walk the shadowed streets of Pompeii, where a brothel's walls still whisper secrets in faded Latin graffiti. We ride with the Knights Templar, warrior monks who guarded pilgrims by day and quietly built the world's first banking empire. We'll taste the honey cakes, olives, and salted sardines of ancient Athens, where democracy wasn't just debated in the Agora, it was eaten, shared, and lived. And finally, we sail west with Leif Erikson into a mist-shrouded land of wild grapes and dense forests, centuries before Columbus ever set sail. 4 stories, 4 forgotten worlds, all real, all extraordinary. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. This isn't just about views or algorithms. It's about building a community of curious minds, one story at a time. And while you're there, let me know in the comments, where are you tuning in from? And what time is it where you are? Because right now, as I speak, someone in Tokyo might be starting their day. A student in Athens is sipping coffee. And a night owl in Buenos Aires is unwinding under the stars. And somehow, we're all here together, sharing stories across time and space. So grab a seat. Let the world outside fade for a while. And let's begin. 1. The Lupanar of Pompeii. Imagine walking the cobbled streets of Pompeii as a Roman merchant, your pockets jingling with coins after a long day.
Ow.
Selling fish sauce when a carved stone phallus in the pavement points you toward the Lupanar. The city's most infamous brothel, a place as efficiently organized as any bathhouse or bakery. You follow the unmistakable sign, turn down a narrow alley where children no longer play, but cats linger in shadows, and arrive at a modest 2-story building marked by a grotesque carving of Priapus, god of fertility, his exaggerated form both a promise and a warning. Stepping inside, you're met not with luxury, but with stark practicality. A tight corridor, no reception, no music. Just 10 cramped rooms, little more than stone closets each, centered around a cold masonry bed where clients brought their own straw or blanket for comfort. Above each doorway, vivid frescoes act as a visual menu, depicting every imaginable sexual position not for titillation, but to communicate services clearly in a largely illiterate society, allowing a man to simply point and pay 2 to 8 assises, the price of bread, for a quick transactional encounter. The walls, thin and echoing, carry every groan, whisper, and awkward silence from neighboring rooms. While the real history of the Lupanar is etched not in marble, but in graffiti, crude, honest, and human inscriptions like "Felix had a good time" or "Thrusting" is tiresome. Ancient Yelp reviews scrawled by patrons and workers alike. Some bragging, some complaining, others confessing love or betrayal, turning the brothel into a raw, unfiltered message board of Roman desire. Behind this facade were the women mostly enslaved. Some freed whose names, like Fortunata or Successor, were aliases meant to sell dreams of luck and beauty, though their reality was one of exploitation, endurance, and the faint hope of saving enough to buy freedom. If a client ever paid in real coin instead of promises, this was not a place of romance, but a machine of efficiency. Visits lasted minutes. Privacy was minimal, often just a curtain, and the goal was high turnover, serving laborers, sailors, and tradesmen who couldn't afford elite courtesans. The leno or pimp collected all profits, the women got little, and hygiene was nearly non-existent. No running water, no disinfectant, just a quick wipe down of stone beds with protection limited to linen sheaths or blind hope in disease, a common souvenir as one graffito bitterly notes, "I paid 2 asses and got burning as a souvenir." Yet the Lupanar wasn't just a single-level sweatshop. It had an upper floor quieter and slightly more refined, possibly for wealthier clients or longer stays, complete with a latrine luxury by ancient standards. and offering a better view, both literal and auditory, over the noisy, intimate chaos below. The entire experience was anything but private. The street noise, the groans, the drunken shouts outside, the internal soundtrack of your own nervous heartbeat all blending into a sensory overload that made the Lupaner feel less like a sanctuary and more like a bustling, an apologetic marketplace of the flesh. And yet, this trade wasn't hidden in shadows. It was legal, taxed, and regulated, with sex workers officially registered like bakers or blacksmiths, though socially degraded, classified as infames, denied rights, unable to testify in court, respected by none, even as their labor filled the empire's coffers. Religion, too, had its place. Shrines to Venus and Priapus stood nearby, not to condemn, but to bless and protect, blurring the line between sacred fertility rites and commercial sex, where a candle might be lit not for love, but for more clients or a quieter neighbor. Then, on August 24, 79 CE, the world ended not with a moral reckoning, but with the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. Ash turned noon to night, pyroclastic surges buried the city, and the Lupaner was frozen in time, its walls, frescoes, and final moments preserved beneath 20 feet of volcanic debris. When 19th century archaeologists unearthed it, they were stunned. Victorians recoiled at the graphic art and explicit graffiti, locking much of it away in Naples' secret cabinet, yet the Lupaner became one of Pompeii's most visited ruins, not for scandal, but for its brutal honesty. A testament to the lives of the invisible, the exploited, and the resilient, because in the end, the ash didn't just preserve a brothel. It immortalized a truth, that history isn't only made by emperors, but also by those who lived, worked, and left. Their names scratched above a stone bed in a city buried by fire, but remembered through fire. 2. The Knights Templar, in the year 1119, amidst the blood-soaked aftermath of the First Crusade, the holy city of Jerusalem was once again in Christian hands, drawing a steady stream of humble pilgrims, peasants, widows, monks from across Europe, all seeking salvation on sacred soil. But their journey was a gauntlet of danger, as the roads from Jaffa to Jerusalem teemed with brigands and Muslim raiders who preyed upon the faithful, stripping them of coins, relics, and lives, until a small band of knights, led by the visionary Hugues de Payens, rose with a revolutionary oath to fight so that others might pray in peace. Founding the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, later known as the Knights Templar, a brotherhood of warrior monks who would live by vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, yet wield swords in defense of the defenseless. Earning the patronage of King Baldwin II, who granted them quarters on the Temple Mount, believed to be the ruins of Solomon's temple, thus sanctifying their mission and giving them their name. But their humble beginning of just 9 knights could not sustain their vision without structure, which came through the powerful influence of Bernard of Clairvaux, the Cistercian abbot whose fiery treatise, in praise of the new knighthood, defended their sacred violence as divine service and helped formalize their rule at the Council of Toi in 1129, transforming them from a ragtag band into an official religious order under papal recognition. Clad in white mantles with red crosses, riding to a horse as a symbol of their poverty, yet paradoxically amassing vast wealth and land, as nobles across Europe donated estates, castles, and even their sons to the cause, turning the Templars into a transnational power with fortresses in the Holy Land like Safed and Crac-Day Chevaliers, where they patrolled dangerous roads, guarded ports, and fought with unmatched discipline and courage, becoming the shock troops of the Crusader states. Feared by enemies like Saladin, who acknowledged their fanatical resolve, even as he crushed Christian armies at the catastrophic Battle of Hattin in 1187, where nearly every Templar was slain or captured and hundreds were executed. Yet the order endured, regrouping to defend strongholds like Tyre and Acre. Fighting alongside Richard the Lionheart in the Third Crusade, their reputation forged in blood and brotherhood, bound by oaths to never retreat so long as their black and white banner flew. But beyond the battlefield, the Templars wielded an even more formidable weapon, money, pioneering the medieval world as first international banking system by allowing pilgrims to deposit funds in Europe and withdraw them in Jerusalem via coded letters of credit, earning the trust of kings and popes who entrusted them with treasuries, making their Paris headquarters the Temple, a financial fortress so secure that monarchs like England's Henry III relied on it yet. Their immense wealth and independence bred suspicion and envy, especially as they answered only to the Pope, paid no taxes, and operated across borders with impunity, leading to whispers of corruption and secret rituals that grew louder as the Crusader states collapsed after the fall of Acre, leaving the Templars without a clear purpose and making their riches a target for desperate rulers, chief among them King Philip IV of France, known as Philip the Fair, a man drowning in debt to the Templars, who saw their destruction as both financial salvation and political opportunity. So on the cold dawn of Friday, October 13, 1307, he launched a coordinated assault, arresting hundreds of Templars across France on charges of heresy, blasphemy, and obscene initiation rites, torturing them into false confessions under the rack and the lash, forcing Grand Master Jacques de Malle to admit to spitting on the cross before recanting. And though Pope Clement V hesitated, pressured by Philip's relentless campaign, he officially dissolved the order at the Council of Vienne in 1312, transferring their lands to the Hospitallers, though much wealth vanished into royal coffers before de Malle was burned at the stake in 1314, where legend says he cursed both Pope and King, who both died within the year, sealing the Templars. And not in obscurity but in myth, their legacy living on in tales of hidden treasure, secret knowledge, and a brotherhood that rose from humble protectors of pilgrims to the most feared and powerful institution in Christendom, only to fall in a storm of greed, betrayal, and royal conspiracy. 3. Street food and daily life in ancient Athens, in the heart of ancient Athens. Life didn't begin with philosophy or politics. It began with food, and not in quiet homes, but in the roaring, fragrant chaos of the Agora, where the city truly came alive each dawn to the clatter of clay pots, the crackle of fires, and the cries of vendors hawking their wares, transforming the marketplace into a living cafeteria where every class citizen, slave, philosopher, and laborer mingled over shared meals under the open sky. The air was thick with a symphony of scents: roasting chickpeas, salted fish sizzling on grills, the golden sweetness of honey drifting from stalls, and the earthy tang of olives, creating an edible theater where survival and celebration intertwined. For most Athenians, home meals were simple bread, olives, maybe cheese, but it was on the streets that food became experience, where quick communal bites sustained the city's rhythm. Roasted chickpeas, sold in papyrus cones, were the true democratic snack, cheap, filling, and beloved by all, from dock workers to students of Socrates, while boiled lentils simmered into hearty stews earned the nickname the poor man's meat, not as insult but as tribute to their nourishing power and moral lesson in simplicity. Bread, the foundation of life, was more than sustenance, it was identity. Barley bread, coarse and dark, fed the masses, while finer wheat loaves imported at great cost signaled wealth. Bakers rose before dawn to fire ovens with olive wood sending muddy smoke across the Agora, and vendors sold loaves hot and steaming, meant to be torn by hand and dipped in oil, wine, or bean stews shared as an act of trust and community. If bread was the base, fish was the flavor: sardines, anchovies, and sprats skewered and grilled over coals, their smoky aroma luring in hungry workers, while larger fish like mullet or tuna offered fleeting luxury, their arrival in the market a spectacle of haggling and pride, because to love fish was to be Greek. And for joy, there were honey cakes, golden, sticky rounds of fried dough drenched in honey, sold by the tray, their sweetness a rare delight in a world without sugar, enjoyed by children with sticky fingers and philosophers who secretly savored them between lectures, not just as treats but as sacred offerings to gods like Zeus and Artemis, blurring the line between devotion and dessert. But not all food needed fire. Figs, plump and sweet, were Athens' pride, eaten fresh or dried for long journeys. Olives, the soul of Greece, were scooped from jars and eaten by the handful, their oil flavoring every dish. And nuts, almonds, walnuts, hazelnuts were cracked open for energy, favored by athletes and thinkers alike, often mixed with honey into portable, sustaining bites. No meal was complete without drink, and for Athenians, that meant wine always diluted with water in a 3-to-1 ratio served from large clay craters in the Agora, cause drinking it pure was considered barbaric. Spiced or urban-fused versions masked cheaper vintages. And even water drawn from fountains and aqueducts was often mixed with a splash of wine for flavor and festivity. While a rustic barley drink called Kychian offered refreshment with sacred ties to the Eleusinian mysteries. The vendors themselves were performers boasting, haggling, shouting over one another, turning the market into a stage of commerce, culture, and connection, where Egyptian grain, Thracian wine, and Anatolian nuts met Attic olives, making the Agora a taste of the wider world. Even more than trade, this was about unity. Families shared meals from common bowls, dockworkers traded figs with friends, and sacrificial feasts let even the poor taste meat, reinforcing that food was never just fuel, it was civic life. Religious festivals turned offerings into shared feasts, symposia. Linked wine with philosophy and power in every bite, from a lentil stew to a honey cake, reminded Athenians that democracy wasn't just debated in the assembly, it was lived one shared meal at a time, in the bustling, flavorful heart of the city. 4. Leif Erikson and the Viking discovery of Vinland. The story of Vinland begins not with Leif Erikson, but with his father, Eric the Red Fierce, exiled and relentless. A man who turned banishment into destiny by founding a settlement on the icy shores of Greenland, naming it with cruel optimism to lure others to a life of hardship beneath the northern lights. It was here, in a world of scarcity, where Leif grew up, learning the rhythms of survival in a land where every winter was a trial and every harvest a gamble. Yet where the sea was not a barrier, but a road. And it was from Greenland that whispers reached him, tales from sailors and drifters of a land far to the west, where forests grew thick with timber, streams teemed with salmon, and wild grapes hung heavy on the vines, a bounty unimaginable in the treeless rock of Greenland. These were not mere tavern tales. They were echoes of a possibility, and Leif, bold and ambitious, chose to believe them. By the year 1000 CE, he gathered a crew of about 35 men hardened, farmers, hunters, and seafarers, board a sturdy Nair, a broad-bellied cargo ship. Built for ocean crossings, its woolen sail dyed red and brown, its oak planks flexing with the waves of the North Atlantic. With provisions of dried fish, seal meat, butter, and ale, they pushed westward, beyond the edge of the known world, navigating not by maps, but by the sun's path. The flight of birds, the color of the water, and the stars above. Guided by instinct and the whispered knowledge of Norse seafarers, perhaps even by a sunstone that revealed the sun's position through cloud and mist. The voyage was brutal. Storms tore at the sails, waves crashed over the deck, and icebergs loomed in the fog, but Leif's resolve never wavered until at last. Gulls circled overhead and the scent of earth drifted on the wind. And ahead through the mist rose a coastline unlike any they had known. Rolling hills, dense forests, and meadows that promised pasture, a land so rich it seemed like paradise after Greenland's barrenness. Leif was the first to step ashore, his boots sinking into soft, fertile soil, and his men fanned out in awe. Drinking from clear streams, marveling at the abundance, and discovering wild grapes that stained their hands and mouths purples. So many, in fact, that Leif named the land Vinland, the land of wine, a name that would echo through legend. They built a small camp of turf houses and wooden shelters, a temporary base from which to explore. And what they found confirmed their wildest hopes. Forests of tall timber, lifeblood for shipbuilding, and warmth rivers thick with salmon, and game moving freely through the woods, a land that could sustain not just survival, but generations. For weeks they lived off the land, fishing, hunting, gathering berries, and stockpiling resources, their mood shifting from wonder to hope, dreaming of permanent settlement, of bringing families, of building a new Norse world beneath the canopy of ancient trees. But they were not alone. The sagas speak of the Skrillings, the native people who already called this land home, shorter in stature, dressed in hides, skilled with bows and arrows, and deeply connected to the land. At first, encounters were cautious, even promising. The Norse offered red cloth, milk, and iron tools. The Skrillings traded furs and food, but mistrust grew fast. The Norse warriors at heart, carried weapons. The Skrylings saw them as invaders cutting trees and hunting game. Startled bulls bellow. A dispute over trade small sparks ignited violence. Arrows flew, stones rained down, and the Norse camp was besieged. Though they fought with iron and discipline, they were few, and the Skrylings came in numbers, knowing the land in ways the strangers never could. In one account, Leif's fierce half-sister, pregnant and defiant, bared her breast and screamed at the attackers until they fled in terror. Yet even in victory, the truth was clear. Vinland was contested. The dream of a peaceful colony faded, replaced by the grim reality of a frontier where survival meant constant vigilance. Practicality, not pride, ruled the Norse. They were survivors, not conquerors. They had crossed oceans before, but they also knew when to retreat. So, with regret and resolve, they loaded their Nair with timber grapes and stories proof of a new world and set sail for Greenland, leaving behind the forested shores of Vinland. They had found it but could not hold it. When Leif returned, he carried more than wood, he carried a legend. The sagas of Eric the Red and the Greenlanders preserved the tale passed down through generations. A story of discovery and danger that hovered between history and myth, dismissed by many as fantasy until 1960. When archaeologists uncovered the ruins of Norse turf houses at Lonzo Meadows in Newfoundland, confirming the impossible, the Vikings had reached North America around the year 1000, nearly 500 years before Columbus. Vinland was real. Its legacy is twofold, a testament to the extraordinary seafaring skill of the Norse, who crossed oceans with nothing but courage and stars, and a reminder of limits of how even the most fertile land could not be claimed without numbers, alliances, and peace. Yet in its essence, Vinland stands. As a symbol of human curiosity of the moment, the known world expanded, and the first European footprints touched the soil of the Americas, not in conquest, but in wonder carried not by empires, but by a ship, a dream, and the wind. And just like that, we've walked the ash-covered streets of Pompeii, stood beside warrior monks beneath the Red Cross, tasted honey cakes in the heart of Athenian democracy, and sailed with Leif Erikson into a land of wild grapes and unknown shores. These weren't just stories of emperors, or battles, or grand monuments. They were stories of people, the ones who lived in the shadows, worked with their hands, who loved, ached, and dreamed in ways we still recognize across the centuries. The woman who carved her name into a brothel wall, the knight who died for a cause he believed was holy, the vendor who roasted chickpeas for a philosopher lost in thought, the sailor who stepped onto a new world and held a grape in his hand, wondering what it meant. They remind us that history isn't just written in stone. It's whispered in graffiti, carried on the wind, baked into bread, and passed down in sagas. And somehow, impossibly, we're still listening. So if you made it this far, thank you for staying, for listening, for letting these old worlds live again, even for a moment in your imagination. If this journey meant something to you, I'd be honored if you left a like or shared this with someone who might need a little wonder tonight. If you're still here in the comments, tell me, did any of these stories feel familiar? Did one of them remind you of something in your own life? Because that's the thing about history. It doesn't stay buried. It echoes. It returns. And sometimes, it finds us when we least expect it. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. And remember, the past isn't gone. It's just waiting for someone to listen. Music fades slowly, silence for a beat, then a soft, genuine sign-off. Good night.